We are very, very lucky today to have Sister Mary Scullion, who many of you may know or certainly know of, a local and actually national legend. And also Luke Tate, who's here from Phoenix now, where he has moved. And I will introduce them in a sec, and as usual, I will ask a number of questions, and then you will ask a number of questions, and always the best questions come from you all. So, and Lauren's my timekeeper, so you're going to wave when everybody gets to ask theirs. I just want to tell a quick story first. Actually, I know Luke Tate because of Mary Scullion. Although Luke and I worked in the White House at the same time, I did not know him because we were in different lanes and doing different policy stuff. But Mary, who I do know quite well, said to me, Elizabeth, I really want to go to the White House and I want to talk to the president's policy person in my space, your space. Can you make that happen? And I said, well, I guess I'll try. You know, I didn't know Luke. So I found him through a couple of mutual colleagues and wrote to you, Luke, and I said, Luke, do you think I could bring a wonderful friend from Philadelphia who is a sort of legend locally in our homeless policy? And her name is Sister Mary Scullion. And you wrote back and said, oh, my God, do you know her? I have wanted to meet her for years. She is a legend. Now, usually people in the White House are arrogant, okay? They think they are pretty cool and like, no, I don't have time for anybody else. Luke said, oh, my God, do you know her? Could I meet her? So I said, oh, my gosh, this is amazing. So we had an astounding meeting, and I brought Mary down with your co-founder, Joan McConnon, and the Militants. And Mary, I mean, it was an amazing meeting, and I'll stop in a second, but Mary brought an agenda that was serious, okay? It was numbered. And it was, Luke, these are the things you have to do. And Luke, you remember we went down them one by one, and Luke's like, okay, right? And that's how the meeting went. So anyway, wonderful pleasure to have you both here. So amazing bios. Mary Scullion, Sister Mary Scullion, founded Project Home here in Philadelphia in 1989 with Joan McConnon. And at the time, it was just an emergency winter shelter. It now houses, I think you have over 700 units of housing, 3 businesses that provide employment to formerly homeless people. It was founded to provide housing, employment, education, and health care to enable the chronically homeless and low-income to break the cycle of poverty and homelessness. And you are a national leader in this space, powerful voice politically, Exhibit A, my story. And you've done amazing things, including gaining the right to vote for homeless people, I believe, which we can talk about. Also, a landmark federal court case about the fair housing rights of persons with disabilities, et cetera. And you're only halfway through your life, so I'm looking forward to the next 16 amazing things. Sister Mary was also the 2011 Citizen of the Year by Philadelphia Inquirer, selected by Time Magazine recently as one of the world's most influential 100 people in the world, an Eisenhower Fellow, et cetera, on the board of St. Joe's. Bon Jovi, a good friend of Bon Jovi, that's another fun story. And this is cool, she chaired the Hunger and Homelessness Committee for Pope Francis's visit here. And Luke and I, you kindly included us in that, and that was amazing. If you all watched the Pope get out of his Pope mobile to go and see your wall of knots, which was astounding. So, Mary, welcome. Luke is now, as I said, in Arizona, where he's professor of practice at the University of Arizona, ASU.
Arizona State University.
Arizona State.
Not our rivals.
Okay, whoops, got that wrong.
No.
But he's also assistant vice president and executive director of Opportunities Initiatives at Arizona State, which creates large institutional partnerships, which we'll talk about. But Luke was in the White House for 5 years, and for 3 years, actually before that, with Sean Donovan as special assistant to Sean when he was the head of HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development. But he was also special assistant to the President Obama, and there for 5 years in the White House. I asked how old he was when he got there. You were 28? I
was 28, I think, when I went to the White House. Yeah.
So actually, we're now calling him Jared. No, just kidding. Jared is old. The other reason we're calling him Jared is that, there's no other reasons except that your portfolio was astounding. Luke's portfolio at the White House at the age of 28 included poverty, urban policy, economic mobility, housing, homelessness, open data, and long-term disaster recovery. So, I mean, yeah, quite an empire, so to speak. And before that, and we'll talk about this a bit, you were at Harvard, and you also did community development work and educational work in Nicaragua,
Yep.
which I think is an interesting route to where you got. So, way too long an intro, but welcome. So, I'd love to ask briefly about how you got where you are. I mean, Mary, you might want to start. Why did you found Project Home in '89? What was your route there?
Well, hi everybody. It's great to be here with Luke, who's one of my heroes, and Elizabeth, also a hero, and all of you. I think our path, or the way that I got to this is, in 1989, I was working at Women of Hope, which is a residence for women who had serious mental health disabilities. It was one of the first safe havens in the country, and Joan, Dawson, McConnon was getting her master's in taxes, at Drexel University. And when I did street outreach, the people on the street told me about Joan, so I went over to her. We finally got, talking, and she said she really wanted to do something to meet the needs of the men that were out there because there wasn't much being done. So people basically told us it really wasn't worth doing. People wouldn't come in, addiction, mental illness, whatever, that, not really too much could be done. But what happened that summer is we got the locker room of a swimming pool in the Marian Anderson Recreation Center, and the city let us have that for the winter months. And the men did come in night after night after night, and many of them chose to go into detox and begin a journey in recovery. Men wanted to work, they wanted, they had goals, and like we all do. And yet, at the end of that winter, we had to close the winter emergency shelter because that's what it was, a winter emergency shelter. The kids needed to use the swimming pool, and actually the people had to go back out on the street. And that was a really terrible day for us because we didn't want that to happen. So we said we would never do that again, that whatever we did would have to have a pathway home for people. So in the summer, we decided, and we just threw together a nonprofit that winter, by the way. Oh, let's start a winter emergency shelter. Oh yeah, we have to have a nonprofit, so let's form one. And our board of directors were all homeless people, and Joan and I, and we made the rules and all that. It was kind of fun. But at the end of that summer, when we decided we really want to do something more for solutions, two things happened. One is we decided it was HOME, H, affordable housing, O, opportunities for employment, M, medical care, and E, education. It was those four things that we thought would really end homelessness. Later on, we found out they were the same four things that would prevent it, and that would be a better way to go than, having people experience homelessness. But also that summer, and this is true, this family came down because one of their relatives or whatever told them to go down and help, and they just wrote a check on the spot for $100,000. Like, I'm telling you, we had no organization. We were put together this nonprofit. It was really, people help with food, people help with blankets, this and that. Someone drove the van, but we didn't have any real resources. So when that happened, we said, we're putting that in the bag and we're going to do something substantial. And that was actually the seeds for Project. We thought that was like a sign. And so we thought that was the seeds for Project Home. We borrowed $50,000 from the Sisters of Mercy, no interest. We put it down on a building. And I won't go, the rest of the story is too long. But that's how Project Home started. And I think at that day and to this day, it's the men and women and the kids that experience homelessness that we've been fortunate enough to partner with and actually walk on a journey with. And they've kind of shown us the way, in spite of us many times. But, we go on the journey anyway, and that's kind of how Project Joan started. The men and women on the street were our first board of directors. When we did our organizational chart, they were at the top of it, and then our board of directors reported to them, and we reported to them. That was our first organizational chart. We've had to change that a little bit, but it doesn't matter. But the concept is hopefully still the same.
Quick question that I've always been curious about. Is this part of your being a nun, or did this come out of your being a sister, or could you have done this without that?
That's a good question. I get asked that many different ways. But I think for any one of us, like whether you fall in love, and I would call that like a grace, or you are really, attracted to a certain kind of work or profession, it's that, like, kind of, and the only word I can think of is like love almost, that pushes us forward. And like I always say that love is transformational. So when you love somebody, you're always going to be different. When you love, whether it's a real partner or it's just a friend, but like love changes everything. And I know that love is the right word, but it's just that way. So I feel like I've been totally transformed through this process, and this being able to participate in this community. And I've heard other people, stories of transformation too. And then, so it really isn't about being a nun. It's really about being a human being. And at Project Home, we have people from all walks of life. Project Home is not a Catholic organization. It's an organization of people who believe in the strong spiritual conviction of the dignity of every person. And what I think has really been a powerful thing is people just enter the community of Project Home in whatever way they feel like or feel comfortable being part of it. And somehow, and I mean, it's not that just somehow. I mean, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of trial and error, a lot of no's, and a few yeses. And when you get the yes, you pick up the ball and you run down the court as far as you can until they give you another no. So I think it's really about being a human being. And I think faith, obviously, in my personal life, is really like hugely important and hugely transformational as well. But I would say like Project Home is really like that broad community of people. And some of the people who belong to Project Home come through it from a faith perspective. Many people come through it like agnostic or not really religious, just like a spiritual thing or a higher power or, whatever you want to call it. So I call it just grace, you know what I mean, in a way. And
great life lesson. That's a great life lesson. So basically find a love and follow it and do something with it. It'll drive you.
In the context of a community and in the context of mercy and justice, of compassion and justice. That's
a wonderful life lesson. So Luke, you were telling me earlier that a lot of what drove you came out of your childhood and your upbringing and where you're from, and then through the Robert Putnam story. Tell us how you got where you are.
Sure. So I'm happy to do that. I do want to say I'm really grateful to be with all of you today. Grateful for the work that you're doing and the work that those of you who are students are preparing for. People who dedicate their lives to others are the best people in the world. And I'm grateful to be part of that community with you. And so incredibly grateful to be here with Sister Mary, who's a hero to me and has been a guiding force over the last many years in the work that we've done to end homelessness nationwide. And so happy to talk a little bit about how I got there, if it's useful to y'all. So I grew up in Central Phoenix, and my folks are both teachers. My dad was teaching at the time. My mom had many years off raising my brother and I. And the community I grew up in, most of the folks that I knew, the kids in my school, didn't have the same sort of opportunity set that my brother and I had because of my parents being educators, and we'd go down to the library every weekend. We'd check out 25 books because that's the most you were allowed to check out. And I'd read them all, and I'd bring them back the next weekend and check out 25 more because that's the most you're allowed to check out. And my mom knew who the best kindergarten teacher was, the best first grade teacher, and she's working an educational system to within an inch of its life, And because of that, because of the many advantages and privileges that accrued to me being a white guy throughout my entire life, because of all of those structural forces, I had every opportunity I could possibly want in my life. I grew up in Central Phoenix and went off to Harvard, and that wasn't a common story, but it also wasn't something that I made for myself. It was the result of the confluence of all of these different things that led to me having that opportunity that weren't there. All of those necessary stability of life, the opportunities available to you that weren't there for a lot of the kids I was growing up with. And it was always my view at the time, and it remains my view, but I think maybe only slightly less strongly, that the most powerful levers that one could pull to do something about that are policy levers. That the decisions we make as a polity, right? The decisions we make as a polity about education, about healthcare, about public safety, were profoundly shaping what was available to me and wasn't available to a lot of guys I was growing up with. And because I could see that at the time, I decided I wanted to go into policy. And ended up focusing on that. I was working in Southie and Roxbury in college and studying with a guy named Bob Putnam, who is a social capital expert leader in the field. And he was running something called the Saguaro Seminar on Social Capital that State Senator Barack Obama was a part of. And I never met him at the time, never actually got introduced to him or anything, but in reading what he was writing in those years, it was just clear to me that he had the sharpest sense and the most insight of any politician that I'd ever seen on the interconnected nature of challenges in communities like the neighborhood I grew up in or the communities I was working in at the time. And, a lot of this we sort of know instinctively. If a kid's head is not in the game in the classroom, maybe it's because he was worried about getting beaten up on the way to school, right? And the science has evolved here as well. We know, for example, that growing up in a violent environment, irrespective of whether or not you yourself experience violence, the cortisol and adrenaline dumping into your blood day after day causes a phenomenon physiologically known as allostatic load, inhibits neural connections from forming, right? That's how we form memories. That's how we learn, right? So we wonder why did, when we put this educational program into place, why isn't it working? Why aren't we seeing the results that we thought we were going to? Well, because we've failed to address the totality of injustices that kids in that community that you're trying to, serve with this silver bullet are experiencing every day. And so I went to work in the Obama administration and then in the White House to try to build a stronger fabric to support more communities like mine, to ensure that more kids growing up in neighborhoods like mine had a stronger default trajectory, and that it didn't take everything that it took for my parents for me to have the opportunities that I had.
Fascinating. I love how you both say the word community a lot. And I remember Bob Putnam in Bowling Alone, it's all about, we used to bowl in communities, in teams, and now we bowl alone. So I think community is a fascinating theme for both of you. Clearly, you want to create a community for your people and to make our communities better. Interesting. So where you really intersect or overlap is in the homelessness policy area. And we could talk forever about this, but what kind of progress do you think we've made? And what are you most proud of that you have been part of or that you have seen happen? I mean, I know we talked about Obama's agenda, you and I, Luke, just a minute ago, and talking about, people talk about Obama's real successes have been, healthcare and Dodd-Frank, but that he views this space as one of the most important.
Yeah. Do you want to start? I'm happy to.
You want to do it?
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Tell me the first question again.
I mean, have we made enough headway?
Progress.
Yeah.
Right. So, I get it. Okay. I was on step one. So the first one is See, homelessness is not an issue in and of itself. I mean, unless you are homeless, and then it is an issue in and of itself. But it's symptomatic of society's deeper problems. It's symptomatic of poverty. It's symptomatic of the lack of affordable housing. It's symptomatic of the lack of access to health care. Symptomatic of, failing schools, for multiple reasons. Symptomatic of not having jobs at livable wages. So, like we say, it's like a four-legged stool. So if housing, education, healthcare, or employment are missing, that stool's not really going to hold up. The thing is, you can have awesome programs. Pick any program, including Project Home. It's nice, but it's a drop in the bucket. It's not a program solved problem. It's a national public policy problem that we're trying to address the best way we can to touch the suffering of people experiencing it at the moment. But the bottom line is homelessness is a result of failed public policy. And the best example I can give you is of course you know it's a true story, but
This was true.
She's going to tell you only true stories.
But I started doing this in 1976, and I worked at Mercy Hospice, which was the first shelter in the city of Philadelphia, either for single people or mothers and kids, that was going to be opened up 7 days a week. And the reason is because we didn't need a 7-day-a-week shelter. That in 1976, true story, people, like if they came to an emergency shelter like OSH, they call it now the city services, they could get placed that day. They could get public housing in less than 30 days. That was just the way it was. And in 1976, you know what we were worried about? That public housing wasn't good enough. It was like a little, it was unsafe in some, projects, or there were the projects and, whatever. And that was what the advocacy was at that time. But affordable housing, there was affordable housing in Philadelphia and throughout the Commonwealth. When Reagan came into office and his housing policies really destroyed a lot of that. And then coupled with cocaine and this actually, what I'm going to say to you next, is actually a good thing, but we just weren't prepared for it, and that was deinstitutionalization for the mentally ill. And I'm going to just throw in this one thing. I did street outreach, still do street outreach. I've known thousands of people that were seriously mentally ill. No one has ever said, could I please go back to Byberry? I mean, people, we had women that lived in phone booths, that lived in doorways, much better than Byberry. And that's what they would say to me, and I believe them.
Byberry was explained to us.
Well, Byberry was like the state mental hospital.
Right.
So like in the 60s, if you were really seriously mentally ill, they would just lock you up for the rest of your life. I mean, I'm saying that in a bad way. I'm saying that in a pejorative way. What it means is that they would institutionalize you because of your disability. The thing is, Byberry was about like $90,000 a year to keep someone in Byberry. What they said is, I think it was Kennedy administration, no, we're going to deinstitutionalize people, we're going to have community health centers, we're going to have housing for people. There was housing that was affordable when you were in SSI, 30% of SSI, just not enough to provide a decent place for you. So people were deinstitutionalized, but our city was not prepared to welcome them home. It was just the opposite. The mentally ill in our neighborhood? No way. Or, a boarding home, affordable housing? No way, no way, no way. So that was problematic. The advancement of medication wasn't that advanced, and that was another problem. So there were but the concept was a good concept. It just was, we were ill-prepared as a community to welcome people home. And the stigma attached to mental illness, the stigma attached to addiction is still very, very difficult barrier to overcome.
Interesting, very interesting history. Fascinating. What would you want to add to that?
Well, I guess what I'd add to it, the scale of those challenges, I think, led over the course of the 80s and the 90s to a sort of public conclusion, a conventional wisdom, that this was a set of intractable and solvable problems.
Right.
That, our homeless brothers and sisters will always be with us. And it was, in fact, that view that there are homeless people out here as opposed to there are people who are experiencing homelessness, and that is an experience that we can end, that we can solve, right? It was that view that I think needed to change and has begun to change. That, what we've seen over the course of the last many years, we set a goal of ending veteran homelessness, and we cut veteran homelessness in half in the last 5 years alone. Nationwide, 3 different states have ended veteran homelessness entirely. More than 30 cities, Philadelphia included, have ended veteran homelessness entirely.
What was your recipe?
Well, to dive a little bit into the weeds, are the technology of ending the experience of homelessness as an unnecessary and unjust experience for somebody to be going through in a nation as wealthy and prosperous as the United States of America improved. And so, we learned that for most families, long shelter stays were going to be counterproductive for them over time and quite costly to provide. That long stays in transitional housing were going to be quite counterproductive for them. It's very difficult in either one of those settings to achieve your goals for your family, your goals for your work and career, and have tried to steer more and more public resources into rapidly rehousing families in their own apartments, paying for the first month, last month, security deposit, a little subsidy to get them back on their feet. And suddenly it turns out when you have your own apartment and you have a stable place where your kids can be, it's a lot easier to get work and have income coming in, and you get back on track. And for most families, that works really well at a much lower cost, I'd add, than shelter and transitional housing. But that for some families and for some individuals, in particular those experiencing mental health challenges or substance abuse challenges, co-occurring disorders, they need a permanent source of housing. They need permanent supportive housing, and the supportive services wrapped around that permanent source of being able to afford their housing. And it turns out that not only do they need and deserve that sanctuary at home, but it is much more cost-effective for the public generally to provide permanent supportive housing at the cost of $22,000 a year for a housing voucher for an apartment and supportive services wrapped around it, than to pay the $50,000 or $60,000 a year that someone experiencing chronic homelessness will end up costing various public systems, whether you're talking about emergency room care or folks bouncing in and out of county jail and then sometimes even prison. All of these experiences, unnecessary and unjust. It's a choice that we make as a polity to say, we're going to let you have that experience at great cost to us, by the way, great financial cost. And I would hope that the great moral cost registers more than it currently does. But we're going to let you have that experience rather than provide you with secure housing, stable housing, the supportive services you need, even though it would cost less to us. And most of the time, that choice, I think, is made with some sense of desert, what that person deserves. How did they get themselves into that situation? Do they deserve my money to get out of it? And I'd say that's a wrong-headed way to look at it. And what I'm hopeful about now is that when you cut veteran homelessness in half in 5 years, and we, in fact, in the last federal budget, laid out a plan that would have ended homelessness among families with kids nationwide, would have ended homelessness among families with kids by 2020 at a cost of only $11 billion over 10 years. So that's like $1.1 billion a year. Just to give you a sense of the scale here, we subsidize home ownership for middle and upper middle class Americans to the tune of over $100 billion each year. Over $100 billion each year to subsidize folks like my folks owning a nice home out in the suburbs, right? Over $100 billion a year we subsidize, and Congress did not decide that it was the choice that they made was that we are not going to spend $1.1 billion a year, less than 1% of what we spend to subsidize homeownership, to end homelessness among all families with kids nationwide. No one said, no, this plan wouldn't do it. No one said, no, you haven't proven that permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing are the wrong tool. You haven't proven that they're the right tools. No one said that.
What did they say? What was the argument?
There was no argument. We're not going to invest in that. We're not going to invest in that.
No.
And so when I say policy is about choices, right? Mm-hmm. Those choices emanate from our values. It is my sense in the experience of our brothers and sisters experiencing homelessness that public values are beginning to change from questions about desert toward questions about what is just, and how can we spend less money over our public, doing more impactful work. Mm-hmm. So I'd say I'm very hopeful about the direction we're headed. We certainly haven't gotten there yet.
Well, and the HUD budget is not going in that direction. There's been a huge change.
Interesting. So the folks in this room are, you in about 5, 10, 20 years. What advice would you give them in terms of making progress and getting somewhere, not only in this issue, but in any issue they might be interested in working in terms of state, local, federal? What place would you go today? How much harder is it in one or the other? Where's the impact? You're now in Phoenix. Mm-hmm. What do you see?
You want me to start?
Yeah, what advice would you give them?
Sure. So, look, our whole approach across the entirety of the Obama administration was look to the evidence on what works and then build the persuasive case to do that. And so I guess that would be my advice, is you got to start with the evidence on what policy, what approach, what way of supporting and fueling work that's already happening in communities will achieve the outcome that you are setting out to achieve, whether it's ending homelessness or ensuring that everybody has an opportunity for the education they deserve. And you got to look to the evidence. And if the evidence isn't there, invest in building it. So much public policy is set purely on a question of ideology or value, as opposed to looking to the evidence on what works. So we spend a lot of time investing in trying to build that evidence. But I'd suggest that that's step one. And then step two is, politics is felt need. So, something doesn't happen in politics just because it needs to happen. It happens because people feel that need for it to happen. And so, whether it's at the local level, helping as many people who are affected by or touched by or know someone who is touched by a particular issue, see themselves in that issue, see themselves in the experience of, whether it's someone experiencing homelessness, someone who can't get access to an affordable education at the college level because they're not getting any tuition help. Once you can see yourself or someone that you know, someone you identify with, someone that you love in that situation, then suddenly that need is felt, and once you get critical mass around that felt need, you can make good policy. And so I'd suggest that's the sort of order of operations as we've seen it work.
Fascinating data to improve it. Mary, would you like to add to that?
I would just say that it's a new world out there today, and with technology and data, to really familiarize yourself with how to access that, how to use it. I think that's a really new opportunity that's available to you and to us as well, but since you're just starting out. I would also say that whatever issue you decide to tackle, to really heed Luke's advice of the interconnectedness of all issues. Like, whatever you tackle, you're going to know that there are several related issues that are going to impact that. And to find the best experts in those fields to partner with, to be thought partners, to work with you on advancing an even broader agenda. As impactful as any one of you will be in this room, which I'm assuming you all will be in your fields and respective roles and fields, the more you can network and join with others and cast cast that broader net, there's a greater chance of having an impact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also, the other thing that's, I think, this has been something that I've learned over the years, is in doing the work that you do, the people that are most affected by it, and in like my case, people that have actually experienced the homelessness, to give them as many leadership opportunities as you can for their voices, for their thinking, their experience. Like, the solutions lie within all of us, but in a very particular way by the people being impacted by the situation, and to use as many ways and opportunities to get their voices, their ideas joined with yours.
Yep.
I think you get a better result.
Yep.
Well, and I think you both have such immense credibility. I mean, Mary, I remember you actually lived, well, you probably still do live in a shelter. Didn't you live in a men's shelter forever?
I did live in a men's shelter, but not forever. 8 years, but that was a pretty long time. And it was a recovery residence for men right off the street. And the only reason I lived there, is a little weird. If you're thinking that's a little weird, it is. But the only reason I did it is, when we first started, as I told you, we borrowed $50,000. We put it down on a building, and it was at 1515 Fairmount Avenue. And the people in that neighborhood, it was just like a gentrifying, just on the cusp of gentrifying. And but there were lawyers and judges that were beginning to live there, and they went to the mayor, the president of the city council, and the head of the state appropriations committee, and they said, "You see that 1515? That's not going to happen, okay? And we're going to work to make sure it doesn't happen." And we didn't understand. We were like, whatever. We didn't. I mean, I didn't understand what they were really. I understood what they were saying to us, but I didn't really fully understand that they actually had the power to do that. Okay. But this is really true story. We went down made a phone call to DC, to the Justice Department, went down on a train, entry level, you make an appointment, you go in and see people. They took up our case, and they sued the city. The Justice Department of the United States sued the city on our behalf for violation of federal fair housing. And when that happened, Rendell Street, Fumo, that was people that were like against us. They picked Rendell. I mean, and we love him. Like, we're all friends with all these people now, okay? But it was all rough in the beginning. Rendell picked up the phone and called Specter, who was then a senator, and Harris Walford, who was also a senator, and screamed at them. Like, this is in a book, like Prayer of the City. Like, when all the things he snapped out, 3 of them were over Project Thing. He said, why? Did you get them to Justice Department? They had no idea what he was talking about, because we didn't go that way. You understand? But that's how they would have done it. We went like entry level. So, and it was Bush 1, President Bush 1. And you know what? They actually got a meeting with the Attorney General of the United States. This is over 1515 Fairmount Avenue. This is ridiculous. I'm just saying, now it seems ridiculous, but it wasn't ridiculous then. And the Attorney General said, thank you for sharing, but we kept the case going. And then Clinton came in, and it was too late. The case went through the federal courts, and we won in federal court, then we won in the Third Circuit. But again, that was a case of people moving into a neighborhood who were mentally ill, 1515, and people in the neighborhood being legitimately afraid. Like, people were afraid. They didn't know what to expect. This was, and they really seriously, in a big way, opposed it. But we eventually won. But the best part of we won in federal court. But the best part of that story is 15 years later, when we went to do JBJ Soul Homes, which is right down the street. The same people who opposed this vehemently, and that's not an exaggeration. I mean, I can say a lot of stories about that. Doesn't matter. All right. They then supported our project 15 years later.
Yeah, well,
which was amazing.
That's the power of one person.
That's the power of the people themselves.
Yeah.
Who, when people in the neighborhood met our residents, mean, it's not, they're not irate. When the people in the neighborhood met the people who lived at 1515 and became friends, like walk their dogs, hi, how you doing? You know, we're part of the neighborhood. It's those relationships. That's what changed people's minds and attitudes. And that is true.
Yeah, but you had the vision and the execution to do that. I remember when I was talking to the Middletons, who have been great supporters of yours, and they said, look, you know, we're giving this money to Sister Mary because it isn't glamorous and it isn't what is easy to raise money for. You are, but it's not the art museum. It's not, you know, there's not a big black tie gala every other minute because of what they've given you. Unless I'm missing, you didn't invite me.
Well,
No.
I just think that if you look at the Middletons too, it was they who decided, I want to get involved in an issue that's not easy. I want to get involved in an issue that's about people struggling in our community. They decided that. It's like, and again, this is a reverse in case any of you go to a nonprofit and like have to raise money and think about, oh, you know, it's all about going to people and the way you present your case and all this business. It really has nothing, I mean, there's some, you know, validity to that, but the most important thing is identifying people who care passionately about the issue that you're trying to address and getting them involved and giving them a real opportunity to solve it, which means, again, another lesson for nonprofits that often is missed is the capacity in your organization to deliver. And that means that you see me sitting here, but the reason our housing is able is because of Joan McConnon, who has her master's in taxes, and she's applying that to developing housing for low-income people. It's about, you know, people in IT who are really excellent in IT, who work a project home to make our technology, you know what I mean? So it's really about having a capacity to deliver quality product for people, you know, in a struggling situation. That's what.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Not to make this too political, and this will be posted on our website, so I want to note that ahead of time. What advice would you give Dr. Ben Carson, for example? Not to compare him to Sean Donovan or anything, but if you could give him 2 or 3 pieces of advice, and Jim Kenney, our mayor, what kind of advice would you give Ben Carson?
Sure. So, look, you know, we've proven in the last 5 years that it's possible to end homelessness in America, and there are clear steps that we can take collectively to do that work. And I think no matter who's the HUD secretary, you know, that person has a plan before them, and you know, in this case, Dr. Carson, Secretary Carson, can choose to take steps forward on that plan. And you know, the idea that we would all sit here in this room knowing that it's possible to end homelessness for every family with kids nationwide for less than 1% of what we spend subsidizing, you know, well-off people owning larger homes, and just not do it, it's appalling to me. And so that's certainly, you know, if I were offering advice, my advice would be, you know, do everything you can. Of course, it's a difficult political environment. It's always a difficult political environment. Do everything you can to end an injustice that we actually know how to end.
So it actually would have been steady state, keep the course. Here's our recipe.
You know,
it's working.
The proposal that was in the last federal budget, the 2017 budget, to end family homelessness by 2020. You know, I'm sure you'd have to just tweak it to update the numbers a little bit as you know, it's evolved over the course of the last however many months. But this isn't rocket science. There are some things that are really difficult. It's, you know, we've thrown a lot of tools at these. We've thrown a lot of energy rather into developing the place-based initiatives to try to expand educational and economic opportunities, particularly in places that have been enduring structural injustices for decades, and as a result have seen endemic disinvestment and often persistent violent crime. And we've made a lot of progress in those areas, and there are some extraordinary gains that we've seen where folks have banded together in a community in San Antonio and in Los Angeles. I'd say that's still, as a policy matter, a real, an open set of questions. Or what are the right ingredients? What leadership do you need to have in place? How do you interweave educational investments and investments in building mixed-income communities, that are strong and healthy and where everyone has agency, and autonomy. I think we should continue to invest in learning in that space and invest in the communities that have been disinvested in by the federal government, by local governments, by businesses over the years. But, homelessness, we know what to do. Mm-hmm. We should do it. We can end homelessness. Mm-hmm. And so I guess that's the advice that I'd offer.
That's really actually very helpful. We've done it, we can do it, we can keep doing it. We know the recipe. Yeah. Mary, you want to add to that?
The only thing I would say is that in Philadelphia, we have 1.5 million people who live here. We have a 26% poverty rate. With the HUD point-in-time count, on a given night, there were 800 people sleeping on our streets in January. In Seattle, Washington, this is to really underscore what Luke just said. In Seattle, Washington, they have a 14.5% poverty rate. They have 650,000 people that live in Seattle. On that same night, in the winter, what do you think their point-in-time count was?
We were at 800 and 1.5 million.
And a 26%.
26, right.
3,200 people. 3,200 people. So the concept that is like that I'm trying to say is that Philadelphia, and it's really like Estelle Richmond. So many people here for so long have really tried to focus on the issue of homelessness, like city, state, federal. And you know what? You never get everybody. You need everybody. You need the city, state, federal, all singing the same song at the same time. That's Mission Impossible too. But anyway, that it would just be so much better. But to Luke's point, you're always going to have political problems. But anyway, Seattle, I guess they just kind of ignored it, or they didn't understand it was a problem, or they didn't understand the solution was housing. They have a lot of shelters, a lot of transitional, but not a lot of permanent housing. Mm-hmm. And they have a really big problem.
Can I just say,
I think you too, but not as big.
Boy, that's really fascinating.
Well, I appreciate the question about Secretary Carson, but it's not just about what the federal government can do here. There are, obvious investments that the federal government can and should be making. But in a space like housing, local governments have completely different levers to pull that can sometimes have far more powerful consequences. You look at some of the cities across this country that are struggling the most with homelessness, and it is no coincidence whatsoever that those are some of the exact same cities that have made it very, very difficult for the private housing market to respond to growing demand for housing in those cities. Through their zoning codes, through their approval processes for new developments, through the ability of city councilors and neighborhood boards to prevent new housing from being built. Example of Los Angeles. Los Angeles was zoned for 10 million residents in 1960. Los Angeles is now zoned for 4 million residents. The population has skyrocketed over the course of the last many decades, and they are zoned for 6 million fewer people. And, when, this is basic economics. We're at a policy school, right? When the supply is inelastic, prices are going to remain quite elastic and costs go up. So housing costs are unnecessarily higher than they ought to be. In so many of our coastal cities, so many of the cities that often avowed progressives, opposing new development because that development is going to be for market rate housing. And I think, do we need to invest in explicitly affordable housing? Yes, all the time in every city where there's a need. Do we need a private housing market to respond to growing demand in communities where jobs are booming, tech industry is booming? Yes, because if you don't build that housing, those folks are still coming and they're going to displace existing residents. They're going to make housing more and more unaffordable for working families, and we see that play out in city after city, all across the country. And I do not understand what some of our dear friends on the left, the choices that have been made in the advocacy communities that have prevented our housing markets from meeting the needs of all of our residents.
Fascinating. Okay, you guys are up. How about this question right here?
if you guys could just briefly introduce yourselves, that'd be great to get to know you.
Yeah, my name is Nick High, second-year executive MPA student. I am also the executive director for a nonprofit that provides housing and 24-hour care for people with intellectual disabilities and co-occurring mental health disorders, so your presentation was very much up my alley. I think you touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to have you elaborate on this a little bit more. One of the biggest issues we face is NIMBY. Everybody agrees that our population deserves a home. Almost nobody wants that person living right next to them. What advice do you have for a provider to deal with this issue, and do you think there's anything that can be done from a policy standpoint to address this NIMBY issue?
Yeah, well, I'll start. You start with the policy, and I'll take the other part.
Okay.
I mean, how to concretely do it.
Okay.
Not in mine.
So yeah, as a general policy matter, the Fair Housing Act is a useful tool. You know, you whether working with state attorneys general or the local outposts from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Fair Housing Office, you know, the law is in most cases going to be on your side without knowing the specifics of the situation you're up against. But I think there are always practical matters to consider, and your organization might decide that the challenges of working in, for example, a community of solely single-family homes do not outweigh or are not worth going through if you have other opportunities immediately available to you, in which case you can pursue those while simultaneously pursuing a longer-term strategy to achieve the justice that is needed in those communities that are resistant to welcoming all of our residents. Sort of a simultaneous strategy there.
Absolutely. And I think some of the strategies that have worked for us has been like mental illness is an equal opportunity disease, as is addiction. And to unite with other families who might not, who have understanding that issue to support you. So the Alliance for the Mentally Ill, like other groups that would be aligned to what you want to achieve. I think the other thing is really, if you have a site or you see a site, really going to the whole religious community, mosques, synagogues, Christian churches, any of that, because people are more and more becoming more sensitized to destigmatize, these issues. And then another strategy that has really, really worked probably the best for us has been having people directly interact with with the residents who will be moving in. So we do things like just storytelling, like tell us your. Now I don't know about the intellectual disabilities, how that would go. Yeah, I can imagine it is, but maybe having the parents or the staff or with the person, like, because we do have some people with intellectual disabilities, like a buddy system to help tell the story, but humanizing, people with intellectual disabilities are us. Mm-hmm. People that are homeless are us. They're a part of us. What affects one of us directly affects all of us indirectly. That's a quote from Martin Luther King. I mean, not for me. You know what I mean? So, but that's the concept. We say none of us are home until all of us are home. Right. And then I'm just going to end on a high note, because some of these things you can't end on a high note, but I am going to end on a high note here, because I still think this would be like incomparable to a miracle. But this is a true story. They're going to do this like really fancy development at 19th and Walnut. You might have seen it's going to go up like 43, maybe 50 stories, all glass, $1,000 a square foot, like to buy, in there. Fancy retail all around, like 19th and Walnut. It's very high end. Well, that's not, it's not far from here. Okay. The people in the neighborhood in negotiating with the developer who's from Nashville, Tennessee, the people in that neighborhood who are all pretty wealthy people, negotiated 35 units for Project 10.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
How did you do that?
We didn't. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. Like,
Yeah, come on. She's always denying she had anything to do with this.
True. Well, I mean, we had something to do with it, but honestly, the people, because we got Tate's place was what do you call that?
Transition.
No, Tate's place is 144 units right off of Rittenhouse Square, and we were able to secure that property because after 1515 was done, the mayor said, all right, we're going to, you know what I mean? Like, we want to continue and, everybody, kumbaya and all that kind of good stuff. So we said, well, as a matter of fact, we have this place at 20th and Sansom. We want 144 units. Just don't oppose us. And we did some. And
you did a deal.
They didn't, but it's the same story. So Kate's place at 20th and Sampson Street, right in the heart of Center City. The residents, hi, how you doing? We're out in the street. What do you? So the people in the neighborhood, like, it's that connection. It's all about the power of relationships. So, like, all the parents of the kids that you have, all your other sister or brother organizations, you should have mailing lists. Technology. Hey, we need, storytelling. We need you to lobby your churches, your synagogues, your mosques, your Hindu, whatever, to try and get involved in this and to really welcome our people home, because home is for everybody, and we all need a safe and affordable place to call home. And home should be wherever people. This is the United States of America. I mean, allegedly, it's we the people. It's like
not the red states or the blue states.
Like, we can live wherever we want to live, but that really isn't really true for everybody. And that's the stigma and the de-stigma that has to happen. And it is possible, and there are a lot of allies out there, but you have to build one.
And the one other thing I'd mention, as far as allies, particularly if you have or think you might have the beginnings of a legal case, there are national allies, national alliances, the National Fair Housing Alliance. I think you could turn to them, to PRAC, to the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights, as folks who can both help you find local resources and guide you with sort of in general how folks in your situation have approached being able to get local authorities going in the right direction.
And Luke's point is very well taken. Whenever you're in the initial stages of citing something, to get the best legal advice. And here's the other thing I should say in the beginning. We always try to get a site that's already zoned by right. 1515 was zoned by right, but then they made things up. You know what I mean? But you try to get a place that's zoned by right, and then get really, really good legal advice in the very beginning, because that'll save you a lot of aggravation.
Fascinating. A really interesting theme of community and connection and people and storytelling, which is Obama and how he got elected. Everybody had to tell their story, and it was all community organizing. Right. Fascinating. Question? Yes, in the back.
My name is Jolie. I'm a second-year MPA student here at Fels. My question is for you, Sister Mary Scullion. What is your strategy for continuing the work that you do in terms of developing more affordable housing here in Philadelphia if LIHTC, support for LIHTC, goes away under the current administration?
No, that would be...
What is LIHTC?
Wow, that's the low-income housing tax credit. If LIHTC goes away, and we're really, here's some good news for you. LIHTC has bipartisan support in Congress. It's very, very, well thought of. So that is the good news, because what is the great MBA student, second year, here's your question, what's the greatest economic multiplier? It's usually the development of housing and retail, huge economic multiplier. So there's they understand that. And so the LIHTC is a very, very important thing. I'm praying it doesn't go away. Our strategy is to get as many housing units done as quickly as we can. And the way that we do that is we have a pool of money, several $1 million, that we're able to acquire places, get sites in the pipeline, and then just keep banging them out as fast as we can until someone tells us no. You know what I mean? And so far, we have another 88 units in development at 2415 North Broad Street. That'll be completed in the fall. We hope to break ground for an LGBTQ-friendly youth housing in July at 8th and Girard. And we have the site in Center City that will get under construction at some point soon. And then in Kensington, we want to do 100 units of housing, 50 for women who are on the street actively addicted, 50 for men who are on the street actively addicted. So that's our pipe, and the Willard School, we also have about 42 units. So that's our pipeline right now. We're working on all those projects, trying to push them forward. The the challenges is not only building the building, but the challenges are also having the right support to, so that people can be empowered to live a quality of life. We say the single most important thing tending homelessness today, affordable housing. Single most important thing tending homelessness for the future, a quality education for every single child. And so, and the affordable health care at risk, that's another. There's so many things that can go wrong. It's like a juggling act. And so many things can go wrong, but so many things can go right. And you can't wait to do something till everything's right. Because if you wait to do something till everything's right, you're never going to get started.
So
I know
inspiring.
Philadelphia is proud of Sister Mary and proud of Joan and proud of Project Home, but can you just take a second to recognize the pipeline that she just ran us through?
I know.
Is an
She's not doing enough.
extraordinary pipeline.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and
here.
absolutely. And Mary, also tell us a little bit about your the facility that you opened last year that we went to see with the healthcare and the Y and the gym and the
integrated healthcare, because healthcare is so important and access to quality healthcare. So again, with the people in the neighborhood, in the second poorest neighborhood in Philadelphia, we opened the Stephen Klein Wellness Center. So it's primary care, behavioral health, dental, which is so hard to access for low-income people. Even the middle-income people, it's very, very difficult. And then a YMCA, and it's all in one roof. And we also have a hospitality room where people can come, take showers, have lunch.
amazing place.
So
Yeah, amazing. Astounding. Okay, one last question. We have to have one more. You can't leave. Okay, great. Well, how about two? I see two. I see Tony in the back. We have to let him, and we'll have...
Well, continuing on the funding thing, Barbara Adams, I'm auditing this class.
She's
Sister
a
Mary, I'm
perfect
delighted
attendance,
to see you
perfect
again.
Barbara's the expert.
Mr. Tate. No, I'm not. But I was intrigued by something that you said, Mr. Tate, about the additional cost that society bears because of these people that are homeless, and they have demands on health care as well as housing resources, as well as, I'm sure, a number of others that I haven't thought of. And it seems to me that it may be that these costs are siloed, so nobody's
exactly right.
aggregating them, saying, well, it's costing us $60,000 when for $22,500 voucher, as you mentioned, I think, we could solve this problem. I mean, that differential just strikes me as a huge opportunity for somebody to be able to argue to, more fiscally conservative people that, there's a money-saving thing to do here. And, of course, you have the liberal, this is the right thing to do and socially responsible, et cetera. So can you elaborate a little more about any way to advocate for this kind of, fiscal prudence, I guess?
So absolutely. So thank you for refocusing us on that point. It's quite frustrating, actually, that we haven't been able to make more policy progress as a result of that evidence arising over the last many years. But there are a few reasons why, and you already touched on one of them, I think, quite insightfully, which is the different levels of government at which these costs are accrued. So the evidence on the cost of chronic homelessness is now quite strong. It looks like, on average, rather than there's fairly significant regional variation, but you're talking about $22,000 for a voucher plus supportive care to end chronic homelessness, in the range of $50,000 to $60,000 of aggregate costs, primarily in the health and public safety systems, jails, hospitals, et cetera. But when you look at where the investment could come from, the federal government is sort of the direct and obvious investor in ending chronic homelessness, and the Obama administration put forward many budgets that called for many more investments in that area than Congress decided to appropriate. The folks who would realize those savings are so disparate when you're talking about county jails and public safety systems, hospitals where the costs are widely dispersed for emergency care that's then you're not receiving payment for at the time. The stresses on local parks systems, obviously you get increased costs there, the administrative costs in the city systems themselves. And so what we haven't seen arise, and then at the federal level, most of the cost savings comes out of Medicaid. That you're able to reduce Medicaid expenditures as a result of ensuring people have housing. But even at the federal level, you're looking at a wrong pocket problem, where you have to invest money over at HUD and primarily HUD, a little bit of HHS, but then it's a different part of HHS, CMS, that would be seeing lower costs. And so the Congressional Budget Office won't score the savings that would result from the HUD investment. And as a result of CBO not scoring it, you're not able to sort of pay for the investment with the savings that you would generate from that investment. So, it seems like the two potential paths here are, one, we continue to make headway simply on the argument for fiscal prudence, that argument being made by folks on, the more conservative folks who are in the conservative world and more widely viewed as credible within the conservative world. Making that argument, I think, will be really important. When I make that argument as a former Obama administration official, it's viewed as less credible by some. So I think that's important. I think also there's a path here for an ambitious financial institution to put together a much more multi-layered social impact bond than we've seen structured thus far. Those right now are generally in the space of, single input to single city system, usually, sometimes federal system cost saving. You'd have to go like 2 or 3 levels of complexity further to begin capturing some of the savings from ending chronic homelessness. But given the huge delta between the costs incurred and the potential investment costs, one would hope that the opportunity to arbitrage that delta is appealing enough to a cohort of people to decide to invest in getting those next 2 layers of complexity built into a social impact bond or similarly structured financial vehicle.
Love it.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Arbitrage that delta. He could be at Wharton, don't you think? Yeah. All right. Did we have? I thought I did see one last one, which is you. Sure. So final question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cameron Miller, and I'm an employee here at Fels. Sister Mary, early on you talked about your time before Project Home, and you spoke about a move from kind of working reactively, trying to fix the problem in the moment, to working more preventatively, systematically. I think that a lot of administrators find that it's easy to get caught up in those things that are on fire now, though you know that you want to be getting at the root cause. How do you balance these things?
It's when I say it's difficult maybe isn't the right word, but it's strategic. Like, we have to be strategic, and you have to unfortunately be a little patient, which I'm really not. But I had to learn patience, because the return is, like Luke talked about, some aspects of this where it just takes years. It takes years. Like, when we first started, we did this, and then we did 1550, and then we did, we did that. But over time, if you just have to kind of give yourself over to this work and believe that even if you're planting the seeds and someone else is going to reap the fruit, it's still worth it. And I think really engaging, as I said, of like thought partners that you really respect and have maybe a broader or a deeper view, like the MBA students here from Wharton, and the healthcare professionals, and the housing developers, and the tax lawyers, and all those folks coming together to try to tackle this. If you can organize it in the agenda in the right way, it does take a lot of hard work, and it takes a lot of strategic thinking and a lot of pushing and public policy, and then an implementation, and then getting the right people on board to implement it. And our society sometimes wants quick fixes, and there is no quick fix to this. But it is fixable. Mm-hmm. That's the key. Yep. It is fixable. And I use that data from Philadelphia and Seattle to show what long-term strategies or non-strategies produce. And we are close in Philadelphia. We can end street homelessness in Philadelphia. If the political will was there, and it's not a matter of like a Project Home, it's a matter of housing first, it's a matter of recovery housing, it's a matter of the disability community, the intellectual disability community being successful. It's a PHA being successful, the mothers and kids, because what we're seeing today, which is really disturbing, is we're seeing a lot of younger people on the street. Kids 18, 17, 16, runaway kids, who aren't really connected to a family or have been thrown out by their families for being LGBTQ. 40% of all homeless youth are LGBTQ.
Wow.
I mean, they're stunning statistics, and some of the youth, and this is like, again, a hard thing to wrap my head around, so I'm assuming you too, but the youth are couch surfing, they're in the movie theaters, they're riding the bus, they're riding the train, they're staying with a friend, they're doing this and they're doing that. It's not visible.
Yeah.
It's not visible, but it is so there, and it is growing. And then one day we're going to have and we do already, and in the New York Times, I think today, it was either today or yesterday, there was a front page story about trafficking and youth.
Yep. It was actually, they were writing about Phoenix. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but we see that. We see that, these young people being taken advantage of. And unless we're, again, strategic and do stuff long-term, have that long-term thinking and the short-term, like we still have shelters, we still do, all that. And we need to, because it keeps us in touch. But you have to be putting the real resources and the real solutions. Our educational system, we have to be advocates for public. If you want to end homelessness, be an advocate for public education. If you want to end homelessness, we have to be advocates for the Affordable Care Act. I mean, they're going to come back with that.
And I would just say, for folks in the room who might be interested in getting engaged on the fight to end youth homelessness, and everything that Sister Mary said about the overrepresentation of LGBTQ youth and youth of color who are experiencing homelessness is true. The folks who are doing really fantastic work now to ensure that youth don't have to experience, or that youth don't experience homelessness in the sort of numbers that we're seeing right now, who are working to end youth homelessness, are at Away Home America. Megan Gibbard is
Away Home America.
Away Home America. Megan Gibbard is the executive director over there, and there's a role for anyone in this room who wants to get engaged in that effort. They've just stood up in the last year and really impressed by the work that they're doing.
Good website.
Yep.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Amazing